What is good, guys? It's G Miners here. Today, we're going over how to complete the Confluxes encounter on Master difficulty in the Vault of Glass raid with the challenge. The challenge for this week rewards players with a time-lost vision of Confluence. For anyone who is not aware, the challenge is to kill every wyvern while they are sacrificing themselves to a Conflux. Killing a single wyvern too early will result in a failure for this challenge. Since this encounter is straightforward, this guide is going to be covering what to run and some tips and tricks to help your team get a clear. First, let's go over the team comp that you guys are going to want to run. If you are doing this for your first time, I highly recommend having at least 3 Stasis Warlocks with the Bleak Watcher aspect. This will give you Stasis turrets at each Conflux to help you control the adds. If you take in any Hunters or Titans, they will want to be on some classes that deal high burst damage. Since Wyverns don't have a crit spot that are visible until you damage them, I recommend Blade Barrage and Thunder Crash. These supers will be specifically for taking down Wyverns. Before I go into what weapons to run, I want to go over the differences between each of the Confluxes. This will help paint a better picture for why different weapons are needed for different sides. Starting off with the left side, this side will end up being the hardest side to add clear. You will usually have a huge influx of Harpies at the end of each wave, and additionally, the Overload Minotaur from the right Conflux will usually come over to this side, so you will have 2 overloads instead of 1. This side also has anti-barrier Hobgoblins. The Harpies that spawn also have arc shields. Because of the Master Vogue modifiers, match game is on, and these Harpies will also be doing much more damage if they start to fly before they shoot you. The right Conflux has the least amount of adds to deal with, but also the least amount of space. This can also be extremely hard to add clear as the Wyvern and anti-barrier Hobgoblins spawn extremely close to where they are trying to sack. Finally, the middle Conflux has by far the most adds to deal with. If the players defending mid are not good at controlling the adds, players on the left and the right will end up getting shot from behind. Mid also has their own Overload Minotaur to deal with, but will not have any anti-barriers. The Wyverns that spawn in mid also have a huge distance to cover before they finally reach the Conflux in the back. This is nice, but also means that the players on the left and right sides need to be careful when this Wyvern crosses through mid, as it might aggro towards them. Okay, so now that you have some idea on how each side plays, let's go over the weapons that players should have on each side. Once again, we will start with left. As a Warlock, I usually run this side with Egger's Scepter, the Shadow Price, and the Hothead. This gives me a lot of arc weapons to use against Harpies, and the Eggers has extremely good ad control when things get hectic, and DPS for anti-barriers. I also run the Mantle of Battle Harmony for extra super energy. If you don't happen to have a God-rolled Hothead, run Ascendancy. The other player on left usually runs 1000 Voices, a Kinetic AR, and then a Fusion Rifle or Salvager Salvo. This gives them good DPS on Wyverns, anti-barrier rounds, and potentially a different option for taking down Harpies quickly. When it comes to the right side, I personally haven't run this side in a minute, so if you find something works better, that's fine. However, what I recommend, since this Conflux is the smallest, is that both players run 1000 Voices, an Energy Fusion Rifle like Cartesian with Vorpal, and then a Kinetic AR for anti-barrier. Additionally, I would make sure that over any plate, this right side has a Titan with Cuirass of the Falling Star, as this is the most likely plate that you will need to Panic Super. I also think a Stasis Warlock could get away with running the same build that I run on left plate, but the DPS on Wyverns will fall off as rockets do not hit as hard as 1k does this season. Lastly, for mid, the Stasis Warlock can once again run Eggers, an Arc AR like Shadow Price, and a Rocket. This will help for ad control and allow this player to flex to either side and help out with anti-barrier champions. The other player or non-Warlock should run 1k, a Fusion, and a bow with overload rounds. This player realistically should be the only player that needs overload, as the Minotaurs spawn at the end of each wave and can easily be team shot. If you are a Stasis Warlock, you can also run Thermoclastic Strike from the seasonal artifact to help with overload stuns. Once again, 1 Minotaur will spawn on each side, but the one from right should run down over to left. Before I go over some helpful tips and tricks, if you have found this video useful, please consider subscribing and help us push the channel to 2,000 subs. Okay, so lastly, before you go into the encounter, here are a few helpful tips. Tip number 1. This is very obvious, but make sure to do a lot of damage to the wyverns before they reach the conflux. They are probably the tankiest ad I have ever seen in the game. It only takes a few seconds for them to sack, so you do not want to try and full kill it after it has reached your conflux. Tip number 2. During the first round, since only mid has a conflux and a wyvern, we have the team from left come back and help kill the wyvern. This makes it easier and prevents the wyvern from shooting this team in the back as it crosses mid. You might need to pop a stasis ult after this to retake mid and left, but ultimately it's worth it. Tip number 3, during the second round, a second wyvern will spawn at the end. This will despawn, so do not waste ammo or supers on it. Tip number 4, during the third round, make sure you have your super. I would only use your super in a panic situation where you run out of heavy ammo or need to kill the wyvern quickly. And lastly, this is a general disclaimer. You don't need to have 3 warlocks. You could have more or you could have less. If you do happen to have more, make sure that you still have at least 3 people on 1k, as if you have less than that and are under light still, you will most likely lack DPS on the wyverns. Anyways guys, that's all I have for this video. Make sure to check out my other Master VOD guides for challenges on each week. Peace.